Welcome to the very first episode of Rogue Darkness, the podcast that uncovers how misinterpretations and misinformation surrounding witchcraft, the occult, and other beliefs have led many to do unthinkable crimes. From cults and ritualistic killings to brainwashing and extremist beliefs of the world around us, let's explore the darkness of mankind, one crime at a time. I'm your host of the Grim and Gruesome, Raven. We'll be delving into a lot of dark topics here, so listener discretion is always advised. Alright, so with the formal introductions out of the way, without further ado, let's get right into today's chilling crime. Today I'll be discussing a truly horrifying cult known as the Narco-Satanists. Now, if you haven't heard of them, then you're likely not alone. Although they did gain notoriety after the brutal murder of an American teen in 1989, the cult had gone many years under the radar, which their leader actually attributed to protection he received from performing black magic rituals and even human sacrifices. Which that in itself gives you a little feel for how demented and backwards the cult really was. Adolfo de Jesus Constanzo was the leader of the cult we will be discussing, the Narco-Satanists. Born on November 1st, 1962, Adolfo was born in Miami, Florida to his Cuban mother and was raised Catholic. However, it was reported that his mother would oftentimes take him to Haiti to learn about voodoo, or voodoo as it's more commonly known. Not much is known about his father, but Constanzo's mother eventually remarried, and her new husband was heavily involved in both the religion of Palo Mayombe, an African diasporic religion, as well as drug dealing. This ultimately sets the stage for Constanzo and his intense involvement in both that religion and drug dealing. Constanzo grew up immersed in the world of magic, utilizing animal sacrifices to empower the rituals. He soon began to believe that his magical spells were responsible for the success of many of the cartels, and he demanded to become a full business partner with one of the most powerful families he knew, the Calzadas. When his business demand was rejected by the cartel, 7 members of the Calzada family disappeared. Their bodies turned up later with several fingers, toes, ears, brains, and even, in one case, the spine missing from the body. Constanzo soon made friends with a new cartel, the Hernandez brothers. At that time, he also befriended a young woman named Sarah Aldrete, who he soon appointed as the high priestess of his growing cult, which at this time had now coined the name the Narco-Satanists, or Los Narcosatanicos in Spanish. The name combined the two things that Constanzo held dearest, his drug business and his magical rituals. Narcos for the drug business, and Satanists for his evident involvement in devil worshipping. His cult followers nicknamed him El Padrino, or the Godfather, while also giving Sarah Aldrete the nickname La Madrina, or the Godmother, because you obviously can't have the Godfather without the Godmother. And real quick side note here, one thing I do want to mention, since some people may mention it, there is in fact a difference between Satanists and devil worshippers. I would personally classify Adolfo Constanzo as a devil worshipper and not an actual Satanist, even though it was included in the title of the cult. I just wanted to add in a little note so you know I am well aware of the difference between a Satanist and a devil worshipper. Carrying on. Before they began to grow in quantity of followers while working with the Mexican cartels, the Narco-Satanists would provide psychic advice and assisted with the selling of the drugs. But, due to their bloodthirsty and controlling leader, Constanzo, the cult eventually ended up killing several members of the cartels they did business with, and then they would proceed to take over the drug smuggling businesses as they came. The cult grew larger and larger as the drug businesses flourished. We can see how powerful not only the cult became, but how much power Constanzo solely had. It's immensely terrifying how much power he had, and I'll elaborate on why in just a little bit. With Sarah Aldrete as the second in command, she was directed to supervise the cult followers while Constanzo would ship marijuana over the border into the U.S. In 1988, Constanzo moved to Rancho Santa Elena, where he then carried out more sadistic ritual murders, sometimes of strangers, and other times of rival drug dealers. He also used the ranch to store huge shipments of cocaine and marijuana. It eventually became the hub of his business and the soon-to-be-discovered crime scene of several brutally murdered victims. One such victim was 21-year-old Mark Kilroy. Kilroy was a senior pre-med student at the University of Texas at Austin. In March of 1989, Kilroy and some friends decided to spend their vacation in Mexico for some spring break fun. After leaving a nightclub on Calle Obregón in Matamoros, which was known for its nightlife and bars, Kilroy was unfortunately stopped by a group of local men who were posing as police officers. Unknown to Kilroy, the men were unfortunately part of the cult, and you can only imagine what came next. It has been noted that his group of friends had stepped away to relieve themselves out of the public eye, and assumed that Mark might know the men, so they didn't think anything of it at the time. Their concern quickly grew, though, when they came back from the bathroom and Kilroy was nowhere in sight. The men had lied to Kilroy, saying that he was under arrest for public intoxication. Since his friends had stepped away and no one else was around to witness the scene unfolding, the men proceeded to force Kilroy into a truck in an attempt to take him captive. The cult members had apparently picked Kilroy out specifically, since he was a good-looking, young, and noticeably intelligent man, the ideal victim for their sadistic plan. While trapped in the truck, Mark Kilroy had actually managed to escape from the cult members at one point, but he was unfortunately captured once again soon after his attempted escape, being held at gunpoint by additional cult members who were trailing the truck. Once the group arrived at the ranch, they began to torture and sodomize him for hours on end. The cult members enjoyed his pain, as they felt it made the ritual all the more powerful. After the cult members were finished with their horrific abuse, Constanzo unveiled a large machete, which he used to cut off the top of Kilroy's head. Constanzo proceeded to remove Kilroy's brain, and then placed the brain in a cauldron and boiled it, ultimately to consume it. Since Mark Kilroy's friends had still not located him after a few days, they notified local authorities back in the States about the situation. When word got out about him missing and possibly being abducted, the U.S. politicians in Texas became heavily involved in attempting to seek justice for the victim and to try and bring him back to the States if possible. And at this time, it had not yet been discovered that Kilroy had been sacrificed. Under immense pressure from Texan politicians and law enforcement, the Mexican police began searching for potential suspects involved in Kilroy's disappearance. They initially picked up 4 of Constanzo's followers, including 2 of the Hernandez brothers. Police quickly discovered the cult and that Adolfo Constanzo had been responsible for Kilroy's death. Through interrogations with picked-up suspects, the Mexican police discovered that the reason Kilroy was targeted and ultimately sacrificed was because Constanzo sought a quote-unquote good and superior brain for one of his ritual spells. As mentioned, he was the ideal victim in their eyes. When officers raided the ranch, they were met with a truly horrific sight. There, they discovered Constanzo's ritual cauldron that was used to cook Kilroy's brain for consumption. Inside of the cauldron were various dismembered parts, including a dead black cat and remnants of a human brain. 15 mutilated male corpses were soon dug up from the ranch's grounds, one of them determined to be that of Mark Kilroy. After the raid on his ranch and the discovery of the atrocities committed there, Constanzo fled to Mexico City with 4 of his remaining followers. They were only discovered when local police had been called to the apartment complex they were staying in due to an unrelated dispute taking place there. As the officers approached, Constanzo mistakenly believed that they had located him and were there to arrest him, so he began to open fire with a machine gun. This brought in police reinforcements, and they had the apartment surrounded. Determined not to go to prison, Constanzo handed his gun to follower Alvaro de Leon and ordered him to shoot him, as well as fellow cult member Martin Quintana. By the time police reached the apartment, both Constanzo and Quintano were dead by gunshot. De Leon, known as El Dube, and Sarah Aldrete were immediately arrested at the scene. A total of 14 cult members were arrested and charged with a range of crimes, from murder and drug running to obstructing the course of justice. Sarah Aldrete, Elio Hernandez, and Serafine Hernandez were convicted of multiple murders and were ordered to serve prison sentences of over 60 years each. De Leon was given a 30-year term for the murder of Adolfo Constanzo and Martin Quintana. It had also been stated that if co-leader Sarah Aldrete, La Madrina, is ever released from prison in Mexico, the American authorities plan to prosecute her for the murder of Mark Kilroy. Alright, so that was the horrific case of the Narcosatanists and the abduction, torture, and sacrifice of Mark Kilroy. All I have to say is, wow. I mean, wow. This whole case had my head spinning from all the twists and turns and how vile the cult followers were to commit those atrocities without even a shadow of remorse. They didn't even seem to have any remorse for the brutal murder of the innocent victim at hand here, Mark Kilroy, as well as any of the other victims that were found and dug up at the ranch. I mean, that's horrifying, that a human can be so bloodthirsty and unremorseful that they just don't care. And that's one of the most horrifying parts of this whole case. I also wanted to quickly include this little fact that I find extremely horrifying. When all of this happened, Adolfo Constanzo was only 26 years old when he died, and also at the time of Mark Kilroy's murder. For Constanzo to be in such a role of power and control at such a young age, it's both fascinating and horrifying. I mean, it's amazing that somebody at such a young age became so powerful, but it's also extremely horrifying, especially since how he used his place of power to commit such awful and evil crimes. It's just such a sad and horrifying case how all of the events unfolded and the unfortunate loss of life. It's truly heartbreaking, and my heart goes out to the family of Mark Kilroy and to him. I know this occurred over 30 years ago, but it's a case that will remain on my mind for many, many years, and likely forever. So with this being the very first episode of Rogue Darkness, you should now have a little taste of what to expect with future episodes. It was heavy on the horrifying reality of how people can take magic and use it for evil purposes, and the Narco-Satanists did just that. They were truly a cult that nightmares are made of. So let me know your thoughts, and feel free to send in any topics or specific cases you may want me to discuss in the future. You can reach me at roguedarknesspod@gmail.com, or you can also DM me on Instagram at rogue_darkness. I'll be sure to respond as quickly as I can. I have a lot of dark and gruesome cases coming your way, so definitely stay tuned for more. With that said, that's all for today's episode. The darkness is all around us, and I can confidently say that reality is truly more horrifying than fiction. Until next time.